Hello everybody, welcome back to our kitchen. Today we are going to be making a strawberry-rhubarb jam and an orange-rhubarb jam. It's been a little while since we have seen you. We are trying to get into the swing of filming and editing and keeping up with the garden and all the things that spring and summer bring us. And so hopefully we'll figure out a better routine here soon so that we can see you guys more often. So we are going to measure out our ingredients for our strawberry rhubarb jam first. I have, I believe, 8 cups of rhubarb over there in that bowl. I cut and prepped my strawberries the night before so that I could make this a little bit more streamlined for myself today while I was making the jam. And I am going to use my immersion blender to crush my strawberries. I guess you could call that crushing the strawberries, because our recipe calls for, this is a double batch, so the individual recipe itself calls for 2 cups of crushed strawberries. And so I'm going to use that immersion blender just to get those crushed up real nice. So then we're going to add those to our bowl. And then I'm going to dig my other bowl of strawberries out of the refrigerator that I had prepped the night before as well. And we are going to do the same thing with these. Because this is a double batch, I am looking for 4 cups of crushed strawberries. And here I was looking at the amount I had in there and I'm going, okay, I don't have quite enough, so I'm going to dig out more strawberries. We're going to get these cut up, hulled, cut up, and we're going to get these crushed and added to our bowl. And the immersion blender is something that I held off on buying for a long time. And then I had a friend gift me this one. And now that I have it, it is one of those things that it's like, okay, why in the world didn't I buy one of these before? Because it just saves me so much time doing the little things like this. And as we get this dumped into our bowl, the next scene you're going to see me dig out my big deep stock pot that we used when we made the dandelion jelly. And again, I use that big deep pot because it's broad enough to give me a little bit more surface area with my jam, and it's deep enough so that as the jelly or jam heats and it begins to froth, I have enough space that it's not going to boil over and make a giant mess. Don't ask me how I know about that. And this recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, and since this is a double batch, we are going to add in a 1/2 cup, and then we are just going to clean up a little bit, put some of this stuff away. You can see here I'm reading and rereading my recipe, which I do a couple of times during this video. And then from there, we are going to actually start to measure out our sugar. Now this recipe calls for 5.5 cups of sugar, and since this is a double batch, we need 11 cups of sugar. And then we are going to add in our pectin. So you should, I believe, add in your pectin with your fruit while it's cold. I got a little distracted here, so I'm just going to add it in now, get it mixed together, and let that come back up to a boil per your pectin instructions. And so now I got to do some juggling and see if we can get all these big pots to fit on the stove again. This burner over here in the corner is my quick boil burner, and it just seems to bring this canner up to boil significantly faster. Otherwise, I feel like I'm sitting here all day waiting for that canner to come up to a rolling boil to get started. And so we're going to get these settled. We are going to do some more dishes, because if you wait until the very end to do your dishes, you'll feel like you're drowning in dishes. And we are just going to get all of our stuff together, keep stirring this, making sure that nothing is going to scorch. And when it is back up to a rolling boil, we will add in our sugar. And then you saw me think about putting my sugar bowl into my sink, but then I went, wait a second, I'm making another batch of jam. This bowl is basically clean. We're going to put more sugar in it anyways. Let's just put it over here until we need it again. So we're going to get our sugar in our stock pot with the rest of our ingredients. We're going to give that a good stir until everything's incorporated. Again, I have my heat turned pretty high, and I do not want this to scorch. This stock pot here, it has a fairly thick bottom, which I really appreciate. This is not something you want to use a really thin pot for. And here, as you guys know, I prefer to take the temperature of my jam to make sure that I get it to set point of 220 degrees so that I don't end up with syrup. I want jam. And I dropped my thermometer in my jam. And so, silly me, I'm sitting here looking at you guys like, oops, I really hope that this still works. It does still work. It just has quite a bit of condensation in there and was a little hard to read for a while. But we're going to get this stuff stirred up. Again, make sure it doesn't scorch. And we are going to cut up some more rhubarb for our next batch of jam and a cake recipe, which I will share with you guys in a different video so that this one doesn't get to be too long. 219. There we go, guys. 220. Let's get this jarred up. See how much of a mess we can make. And now to prepare for getting that jam into jars, we're going to get all of our clean jars lined up. I like to have everything kind of set up before I start pouring, per se. And I like to have my jars on something like either my cutting board or a towel so that I make less of a mess. It is easier to soak a cutting board than it is to sit and scrub and scrub and scrub at a countertop. And I had a spider hiding in my rings over there, and he scared the daylights out of me. And so now we are going to start ladling our hot jam into our jars. Now these had been, the majority of these were in my dishwasher. I do love my dishwasher for jars. I like that I can, even if I run them the night before, I can actually run them through a hot rinse cycle again to make sure that my jars are at least semi-warm so that I don't shock them when it comes to adding hot product into jars. And so since I had some technical difficulties with my camera, I missed a couple steps with you guys for this day. So you just saw us, we were ladling our hot jam into our jars. We left a 1/4 inch of headspace, and then we wiped our rims with a damp cloth. We put our clean lids onto our jars, put our bands on fingertip tight, and then we put them into our water bath canner, and we process these at a rolling boil for 10 minutes. And while our strawberry rhubarb jam was in the canner, we finished chopping up the rhubarb that we needed for our Rhubarb-Orange Jam. So we are doing just a regular single recipe with this one. And so we needed 2.5 pounds of diced rhubarb, and it called for 2 oranges. Now this recipe said to peel the orange and remove the white pith from half of the orange peel and then cut into thin slivers. I had followed a similar recipe that had instructions like that a couple years back, and I didn't like the big chunks of zest, so to say, in my recipe, in my final product. And so for this recipe, I decided just to zest this orange, and I thought it worked out okay. I zested the whole orange, and it was maybe a little too much orange left in that final product. It definitely has a strong citrus flavor, and that might be my fault. And so it also calls for juicing your oranges and then adding water if needed to make 1 cup. Combine our orange peel, our orange juice, and our rhubarb, and we are going to cover this and let this simmer for, the recipe says for about 3 minutes. I just let it go until I really noticed that my rhubarb was good and soft, and that I thought it could come together really well. And so we're just going to cover this and let it do its thing until we're ready. And then it says to stir in classic pectin. I ended up finding this jar of ball pectin. This is usually my preferred brand of pectin, but it's kind of hard to find around here. And so I used the rest of this jar up. I believe 6 tablespoons is equivalent to 1 package of the Sure Gel pectin that we have used in previous recipes together. And like before, we are just going to get this stirred in together and let this return to a rolling boil, and then we are going to add in our sugar. And this recipe called for 6 cups of sugar. And then once we've got all of our sugar in there, just like usual, we are going to stir it while we get that all real well and dissolved so that sugar doesn't scorch. Do you guys feel like I feel like a parrot, like I'm just sitting here repeating this information to you guys. But that's just how canning and jelly making a lot of times is, as it is following different recipes with very similar instructions. And so now we are going to ladle our hot jam into our jars. We are going to leave a 1/4 inch headspace. We are going to wipe the rims of our jars with a damp cloth to make sure that there is nothing in between that glass and the rubber on our lids so that we get a good seal. And then we are going to put on our new clean lids to our jars, and we are going to put our bands on fingertip tight as usual, and we are going to put these into our water bath canner, and we are going to process these for the same amount of time that we did our strawberry rhubarb jam, which is 10 minutes. And as I mentioned before, I was having some technical difficulties with my camera. And so this is actually some footage of the strawberry rhubarb jam going into the canner. And because, as I mentioned, as we discussed before, it is a very similar process, I just thought I would put this here at the end to show you guys putting something into the canner so that I could more efficiently wrap this up, so I didn't feel like I was leaving you guys hanging anywhere. And so this would be the similar process with the orange rhubarb jam or any kind of jam you're possibly making, is you're going to put it into your canner. A lot of these canners have a rack with the little handles so you can easily raise and lower your product into your boiling water so you're not getting burnt. And in this instance, our water was not 1 to 2 inches above our product. And so I am going to add more water, and then Once this returns to a rolling boil, we will start our processing time. So once this canner returns to a rolling boil, I will start my timer for 10 minutes, let these process for 10 minutes, and then from there we will pull them out, set them aside on our counter, and we will leave them alone again for 12 to 16 hours, just to ensure that we have a good seal. Thank you guys so much for joining us in the kitchen as we made all this jam together. It was really good to hang out with you guys again. It has been too long, and so we will be working on getting more consistent, even though everything has gotten so busy, and we are just trying to find a new rhythm of filming and editing and staying up to date on the garden. Maybe we'll bring you guys some garden updates. We've got some new things going on in the garden for us this year. We've got tons of projects to do down at the barn, and hay season is going to start for us soon. So hopefully Dave will be able to bring you guys some fun hay videos. And so again, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to see you guys, and we look forward to seeing you next time.